The horse, Marshall, balked at what should have been nothing. Finian Croft pulled the reins, squinting through snow that fell like ash from a burnt-out sky. Late November had teeth in this part of the territory, and twilight came early, swallowing the vast, empty plains. "Easy, boy," he murmured, his breath a white plume in the frigid air. The silence of his isolated ranch, usually a comfort, felt heavy and profound. He'd just returned from a long ride checking the fence lines, a necessary chore before the real winter locked its jaw on the land. His boots sank into fresh powder as he swung down from the saddle. Marshall's ears pinned back, nostrils flaring at something near the cabin door. Finn followed his gaze. There, on the rough-hewn planks of his porch, half shielded from the driving snow, was a basket. Woven willow, the kind that took skilled hands and time. It didn't belong here. Nothing new ever appeared here. Finn's heart, long settled into a slow, lonely rhythm, kicked hard against his ribs. He approached cautiously, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip out of pure instinct. Inside the basket, wrapped in a fine wool shawl embroidered with initials he couldn't make out in the dying light, was a baby. A girl, he thought, though it was hard to tell through the blue tinge of her lips and the frost gathering on her tiny eyelashes. She wasn't crying. That scared him more than anything. It had been 2 years since he'd held an infant. 2 years since his own son was born silent, 2 years since his wife, Clara, had followed him into the grave 3 days later. He'd buried them both under the cottonwoods by the creek and sworn he'd never feel that kind of breaking again. Now, his hands shook as he lifted the baby. She weighed nothing. She weighed everything. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, hitching gasps. She was minutes from gone. Maybe less. He tucked her inside his coat, her impossibly cold skin burning through his shirt. Her small head rested against his chest, where his heart hammered a frantic beat of panic and prayer. He mounted Marshall in one fluid motion, keeping her pressed tight. As the horse lunged toward the barn, the swirling snow erased the footprints on the porch, erasing the basket's impression, as if the world wanted to pretend this hadn't happened. "Looks like I'm not alone anymore," Finn whispered into the wind, half to the baby, half to Clara's ghost. The math didn't matter. He rode for the warmth of his cold, empty home. The baby's cry, when it finally came, could have cracked iron. Finn's cabin was one room, dominated by a stone fireplace, its contents pared down to bare necessities. He'd let the fire burn down to embers before riding out, and now the temperature inside was barely better than the storm outside. His hands, usually so steady with rope and tools, fumbled with flint and steel. The baby screamed, not the angry wail of a healthy infant, but a desperate, fading sound that tore through him. He got kindling smoking, then a small flame, feeding it larger pieces with shaking fingers. "Hold on," he said, his voice rough. "Just hold on." He delivered calves in blizzards and set broken bones on horses, but this tiny, fragile life paralyzed him. Clara had warmed milk for orphaned lambs, he remembered that much. He found a bottle, poured goat's milk from the cold box, held it too close to the growing fire, and burned his hand. Cursing, he tried again, testing the temperature on his wrist like he'd seen her do. The baby refused it at first, turning her head away, her weak cries continuing. Then, instinct won. She latched on desperately, gulping milk and air. For a moment, silence fell like a blanket. Finn stood in the middle of his cabin, this creature in his arms, and had no idea what came next. As the milk warmed her, something else became terrifyingly clear. She was burning up. He could feel the fever radiating through the blankets. Her breathing rattled, a shallow, liquid sound. He tried laying her in his bed, but she screamed. He tried a chair by the fire, but she screamed again. So he paced, the floorboards groaning under his weight, rocking her in an awkward rhythm, humming fragments of hymns his mother used to sing. Near 3 in the morning, exhaustion made him honest. "I don't know what I'm doing," he told the whimpering bundle. "But I won't let you die." That's all I got. Maybe she heard the truth in his voice, or maybe she was just too tired to fight anymore. She went still against his shoulder, her small body curving into his as if she belonged there. Finn stood frozen, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too hard, as the first grey light of dawn crept through the single window. He knew two things with absolute certainty: she was still burning with fever, and he needed help. The nearest doctor was in town, 6 miles through fresh snow. Questions would follow. Whose baby? Where did she come from? What was a widowed, solitary rancher doing with an infant? He looked down at her flushed face. It didn't matter. She needed more than he could give. Finn wrapped her in every blanket he owned, built the fire to last the day, and rode toward town as the sun rose blood-red over the frozen plains. The bell over the mercantile door rang like a judge's gavel. Every head in the store turned. Finian Croft, known for keeping to himself since his wife passed, stood in the doorway holding a bundle that moved and whimpered. A dozen townsfolk stopped mid-conversation. Agnes Miller reached him first. A widow herself, she ran the boarding house with kind eyes and capable hands. Finian, Lord above, is that? Found her, he said, his voice raw. On my porch last night. She's got a fever. Agnes touched the baby's forehead and her brow furrowed with concern. Come on, she guided him to the counter, already issuing orders. Tom, get clean cloth. Martha, fetch goat's milk, the good kind. Moved people moved, but they watched, whispering. Sheriff Brody approached slowly, hat in his hands. He was a fair man, but a lawman first. That your baby, Finn? No, sir. Like I said, found her. Basket on the porch. No note, no tracks left. Fresh powder covered everything. The sheriff studied him, his gaze missing nothing. You I mean to keep her? Till her people are found, Finn's jaw set. If they're found. Before he could say more, Silas Blackwood pushed through the crowd. The town's banker, a man who measured everything in property and propriety, sneered. A single man raising a girl child? That ain't proper, Croft. The territorial orphanage in Butte takes foundlings. They have women, resources. A cold dread settled in Finn's chest. She was left on my path. Reckon that means something. It means someone abandoned her, Blackwood pressed. It don't mean you're fit to parent. Agnes Miller stepped between them, her presence a solid shield. Silas Blackwood, this child needs medicine and warmth, not your judgment. Finian is doing what's right. I'm considering what the law requires, Blackwood said stiffly. Finn looked down at the baby. Barely breathing yesterday, feverish today, completely dependent on strangers. I'm calling her Grace, he said, his voice steady and clear. Seemed right, given the circumstances. The room went quiet. Naming her made it real. It was a claim. Agnes smiled, a warmth that chased some of the chill from the room. Grace Croft. That's a good, strong name. She turned to Finn. I'll teach you what you need to know. Feeding, washing, reading her signs. You won't be alone in this. Sheriff Brody cleared his throat. Keep me informed, Finn. Any news about family, you report it. Understood, Sheriff. As Finn paid for his supplies, Agnes walked him to the door, her voice low. There was a girl, Eleanor Redmond. Cattle baron's daughter from up north. She was pregnant, unwed. Her father disowned her. Nobody's seen her in months. Finn looked down at Grace, sleeping now against his shoulder. The shawl she'd been wrapped in had the initials E.R. stitched in fine thread. His hands tightened on the supplies. Thank you, Agnes. Don't thank me yet, she said softly. This road you're walking, it won't be easy. Good things never are, Finn replied, and carried Grace back out into the cold. December came with deep snow and a deeper silence, but it was a silence now filled with the small sounds of a new life. Finn learned more in 6 weeks than he had in 6 years of ranching. Babies, he discovered, had strong opinions about everything. Grace had more opinions than most. Agnes visited nearly every day, teaching him with a patience he didn't know existed. How to test the bathwater, how to read Grace's different cries. The sharp one for hunger, the building wail for a wet diaper, the exhausted whimper that meant she needed sleep but couldn't find it. Talk to her, Agnes said one afternoon, showing him how to fold a clean cloth. Babies need voices like they need milk, so Finn talked. He told her about the land, the winter sky, and his plans for the spring. He read to her from Clara's Bible, the book of Genesis, because beginnings felt right. Grace would stare at him with wide, serious eyes, as if she understood every word. The community began to soften. Women from town brought by hand-stitched blankets and outgrown baby clothes. Men who had once kept their distance now nodded respectfully when Finn came for supplies. Then, in the 5th week, everything changed. He was changing Grace's diaper, still clumsy but getting better, when she smiled at him. Not gas, not an accident, but a real, brilliant smile that crinkled her eyes and was directed straight at his face. He froze. Then, like a spring runoff, tears came, fast, unexpected, and unstoppable. The first he'd shed since standing over Clara's grave. "Well, now," he managed, his voice broken. "Guess we're going to be just fine." That evening, Agnes stayed late. They sat by the fire after Grace fell asleep, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm. Finn found himself talking about Clara, about their son who never drew a breath, about the 2 years he'd spent half alive. "You were meant to find her, Finn," Agnes said quietly. "Some things aren't coincidence." Their hands were close on the table, almost touching. He looked at Agnes then, really seeing her for the first time, the strength in her gaze, the kindness etched around her eyes. A widow, same as him. He pulled back slightly. "I'm still figuring out how to live again, Agnes. Don't know about more than that." She smiled, a sad but understanding expression. "That's all right. Grace is teaching you. I can wait." 2 days later, a letter arrived from Denver. It bore an official seal and was written in a lawyer's sharp script. Finn left it on his table for 3 days, looking at it as if it were a coiled rattlesnake. When he finally opened it, the words felt like winter returning with a vengeance. He rode to town and found Agnes at the boarding house, handing her the letter without a word. She read it twice, her lips pressing into a thin line. "It can't be," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Tell me it says something different." But it didn't. The letter was from an attorney representing Arthur Redmond, a prominent and powerful cattle baron. His daughter, Eleanor, had died of a fever 6 weeks prior. On her deathbed, she had confessed to leaving her infant daughter on the porch of a good man she had watched from afar, a man she knew would protect her child. Now, Arthur Redmond demanded his granddaughter be returned to his estate immediately. "He's got lawyers," Agnes, Finn said, pacing the room. "Money, blood, a legal claim. What do I have?" Agnes gripped his hands, her fingers warm and steady. "You have every midnight feeding. Every fever you walked her through. Every moment that child needed someone and found you there. That's what you have. A judge won't see it that way. Then we'll make him see it." Just then, the door opened and Silas Blackwood stepped in, a smug smile on his face. "Croft. Heard about the Redmond letter. A terrible situation, but family is family. Blood matters. What do you want, Blackwood?" "Just offering counsel. A man like Arthur Redmond has connections. Judges, politicians. Fighting him would be unwise. Best to let the child go to her rightful family." Finn crossed the room in 2 strides, his voice low and dangerous. "Get out. I'm just trying to help you. You're trying to get Redmond's banking business. Now get out before I help you out." After Blackwood left, his smirk lingering in the air, Agnes said, "He's circulating a petition. Concerned citizens asking that Grace be placed with her blood relatives. When is Redmond arriving?" "1 week." Finn nodded slowly, his gaze distant. "Then we have 1 week to figure out how to fight money and blood with nothing but love." "Love isn't nothing, Finian," Agnes said fiercely. "It's everything. Arthur Redmond arrived like winter itself, cold, inevitable, and unforgiving. The town hall was packed. Finn stood near the back, Grace in his arms, Agnes at his side. Redmond was a man carved from granite, with a grey beard, an expensive coat, and eyes that measured everyone and found them wanting. 2 lawyers flanked him. "Where's the child?" Redmond's voice cut through the room like an axe. Sheriff Brody gestured. "Finian Croft has been caring for her." Redmond's gaze found Finn, measured him, and dismissed him. "Bring her here." "No, sir," Finn said quietly. The room fell silent. "I beg your pardon." "I said no. She's content where she is." Redmond's jaw worked. "That child is my granddaughter. My blood. My heir. You have no legal claim. I've got a moral one." One of Redmond's lawyers stepped forward. "Mr. Croft, my client is prepared to offer you $5,000 for your trouble." "She isn't trouble," Finn interrupted, his voice ringing with conviction. "She's my daughter. And she isn't for sale." The room erupted. Warren Kent produced his petition. "I have here 30 signatures from citizens who attest that Mr. Croft, while well-meaning, is unfit. He's unmarried, isolated, and lacks resources." "He's loved her," Agnes Winslow said, her voice shaking but clear. "Every day, every night. That's more than resources. That's everything." She told the room about her own niece, lost to a wealthy relative who had money but no heart. "Money doesn't make a parent," she finished, her gaze fixed on Redmond. "Love does. Daily, unglamorous, exhausting love. The kind Finian Croft has shown every single day." Redmond stared at Finn. "What can you give her that I cannot?" Finn met his gaze. "A father who chose her. Not a grandfather who drove her mother to an early grave." A flicker of pain crossed Redmond's face before it hardened again. "Judge Hemlock arrives tomorrow. We will settle this legally." That night, Judge Hemlock, a territorial appointee who owed his position to men like Redmond, granted temporary custody to the grandfather. Finn had until dawn to surrender Grace. He carried her home through the falling snow, his heart a hollow ache. He did everything one last time, the midnight feeding, the changing, rocking her while humming hymns. He memorized her face, the way she gripped his finger, the small sounds she made in her sleep. Near dawn, he packed her basket with the clothes and toys the town had given her, and the embroidered shawl that was her mother's last gift. He wrote a letter, to be given to Grace when she was old enough to read. "Your mama loved you enough to save you. She chose me because she knew I'd keep you safe. You were wanted every day. You saved me when I was drowning. Don't ever forget that." When Arthur Redmond's carriage arrived, a hired nurse stepped out. She reached for Grace. The baby screamed. Not a normal cry, but a primal, terrified shriek. She arched away from the stranger, reaching back for Finn with desperate little hands. Redmond himself climbed down and took her. She screamed in his arms, batting at his face. He stared at his granddaughter, his blood, and something in him finally cracked. He saw the shawl his daughter had embroidered. He saw his daughter's final, desperate act of love, saving her baby from him. What would Eleanor want? Finn's voice was quiet, but it cut through the screaming. Redmond looked up, his face wet with tears. "What? Your daughter. What would she want for Grace?" The old man's shoulders slumped. "She'd want her raised with kindness," he whispered, his voice breaking. "The same kindness I never showed her." Just then, the sky opened up, unleashing a blizzard so vicious it could kill travelers caught on the open plains. They were trapped. For 3 days, they stayed in Finn's tiny cabin. And Arthur Redmond watched. He watched Finn warm bottles at 3 a.m. He watched him pace the floor with a restless grace. He watched Agnes arrive through the storm with medicine for a slight cough. He didn't see a lonely rancher, he saw a family. On the second night, Redmond held Grace while Finn cooked. She didn't scream this time. The old man's hands were surprisingly gentle. I killed my daughter, he whispered, tears dripping onto her blanket. My pride. I drove her away. She ran because she feared I'd ruin her baby the same way. So don't, Finn said, stirring the stew. Be better. This is your second chance. When the storm broke, the hearing convened. The courthouse was packed. Judge Hemlock presided. Mr. Redmond, you have brought Sloot for custody. Redmond stood. Your Honor, I withdraw my claim. A shocked murmur swept the room. My daughter chose this man for a reason, he said, his voice steady. She chose love over legacy. I will not dishonor her final wish. He turned to Finn. I'd like to establish a trust for her education. And? I'd like to visit sometimes. If that's acceptable. Finn looked at the man who had nearly destroyed him and saw only grief and the first shoots of redemption. Grace should know her grandfather, he said. As long as you remember you're a grandfather now, not a king. Sheriff Brody stood. The petition has been withdrawn. I was wrong. One by one, others stood, recanting their signatures. Judge Hemlock looked at Finian Croft, a simple rancher holding a baby who was now, legally and wholly, his. The court recognizes that family is built, not born. Custody is granted to Finian Croft. Spring came to the valley the way hope does, quietly at first, then all at once. Finn's cabin now had a new room, built by the men who'd once signed a petition against him. Agnes's curtains hung in the windows, and Grace's toys were scattered across the floor. Agnes came for Sunday dinner, as she had every Sunday for months. The town had stopped whispering and started planning a wedding, though no one had officially asked anyone yet. After dinner, Finn sat in the rocking chair with Grace on his lap, reading from Clara's Bible. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people. Grace grabbed the pages with sticky fingers, and he laughed. Later, they rode to the spot where he'd built a small stone cairn for Eleanor. Arthur Redmond, visiting for the third time that month, met them there. He played gently with Grace, telling stories of her mother's childhood. Do you think she'd forgive me? He asked quietly. I think she already did, Finn said. That's why she made sure you'd meet Grace this way. That evening, Finn stood on his porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Agnes was beside him, and Grace was in his arms. She reached up with both hands, grabbed his beard, and pulled herself forward to give him a wet, slobbery kiss. Agnes laughed. She knows her daddy. Finn smiled, no longer broken, no longer alone. Inside, the fire burned warm. Outside, the last of the snow had finally melted. Winter was just a memory. Spring, at last, was home.